Hi, welcome back to week 4. This week we'll be starting to cover angiosperms, or the flowering plants, and these are also known as broadleaf trees and shrubs. So we've been covering the conifers, which have very thin needle-like leaves. Now we're moving on to the trees and shrubs that have bigger or broader shaped leaves.
Just to do a quick review here on angiosperms versus gymnosperms. Angiosperms are broadleaf plants, so they have larger leaves, not usually needle-shaped leaves. And they have flowers which develops into fruits when they're fertilized, and their seeds are contained within that fruit. Gymnosperms, or the conifers, do not have flowers, but most of them have seeds contained within cones. There are only about 600 conifer species worldwide, but there are over 250,000 flowering plant species worldwide. As I just mentioned, angiosperms are the flowering plants, and you might tend to think when you hear flowering plants of things like daisies or lilies, but every tree and shrub except for conifers has flowers on it. Some of them are very showy, and some of them are not so showy. So some things like the dogwood has quite a large white showy flower. Other things like willows and cottonwoods and aspens have their flowers at a catkin, which is much less showy. So just because it doesn't have a very showy flower doesn't mean it's not still categorized as a flowering plant. As you're looking for shrubs and trees, our collections for this class will just deal with shrubs and trees. And just to remind you, forbs are smaller green plants that typically have more showy flowers, like lilies or daisies or lupins. And some of them can be as large as a small shrub, but they're never woody. So for this class, we're dealing with only woody trees and shrubs. And shrubs typically have several woody stems coming out of the ground. And they're usually several, at least 2 or more feet tall. So an example would be like a rose, blackberry, even sagebrush, which can only be like a foot tall, would still be a shrub because it has those woody stems. And our focus for this class will be shrubs and trees and not the forbs. So for your collection, you won't be pressing and mounting the smaller plants.
I just want to start by going over how to use the angiosperm key. So I'm going to go through the key on page 107 to show you an example of keying out an angiosperm or a broadleaf shrub. So I'm going to key out and show you how you can tell the difference between rabbitbrush and sagebrush with your key. And if you're able to find one or both of these at some point this week or next week, then you can use that as one or both of your plants to key next week. So just an overview of the difference between the two plants. Sagebrush is a light gray-green or sage-colored plant. It will have a strong smell when you pick a leaf and smell it. It's usually fairly small, will probably be only about 1 to 2 feet tall, but can get larger. And rabbitbrush is a similar color and size, but it has narrow grass-like leaves. So if you look at the sagebrush here, the leaves are a little bit, not really wide, but a little bit wider. And the rabbitbrush has really grass-like, really narrow leaves. So if you find either one of those this week, you can key those out and use those for your lab for next week.
Just to show you what the flowers look like of sagebrush and rabbitbrush, they're both kind of a bright yellow color. But again, keep in mind that if you do look at the leaves, they do look quite a bit different. If you do try to Google these plants, you might see quite a few people mixing up the two plants just because they do have quite a few similarities. So just remember that those leaves are what you're looking for as one of the main characteristics to tell them apart. Alright, so let's go ahead and work sagebrush through the angiosperm key on page 107. Question number 1 on page 107 says leaves are reduced to spines or leaves are not reduced to spines. These leaves, as you can see, are not spines, so we'll go ahead and go to question number 2. Question number 2 says leaves are simple, which means 1 leaf per petiole or leaf stalk. And the second number 2 would be leaves are compound. These leaves, it's a little bit hard to tell, but they are simple. There's just 1 leaf per stalk coming off the main stem. So we're going to go to question number 3. Question number 3, do the leaves come off the stem opposite from each other, or do they alternate in their position coming off the stem at different points? And you can sort of tell here that the leaves do come off the stem at different points, and this would be alternate, so we're going to go to number 4. So for question number 4, it asks if the leaves are palmately lobed or not palmately lobed. Even though these leaves are lobed at the tip, palmately lobed would have very deep lobes going all throughout the leaf. If you look at like the palm of your hand and think of your fingers coming off your palm, that would be the shape of a palmate leaf with deep lobes. And the sagebrush is not palmately lobed, and also in palmately lobed, the veins all meet at down at the stem of the leaf, or the petiole, and branch out from there, whereas in the sagebrush leaf, it has one main vein going up the leaf, and then it branches further up the leaf. And it's a little bit hard to see because it's very small and light colored, but the main thing would be that shape is not the shape of a palmate leaf. So we moved on to question number 15, essentially asking the same question. The leaves are not palmately lobed, so we're going to go to number 20. Question number 20 asks if the branches are armed with thorns or not armed with thorns, and they are not armed with thorns. It may be a little hard to tell in the picture, but if you pick one, you'll notice it's not poking you when you pick it up, and that means we will go to question number 21. Question 21 asks if the leaves have 2 to 4 distinct glands on the petiole or the base of the leaf. This might be a question that you would get to and not know what glands look like. If you do get to a question in your key and you don't know what they're talking about, feel free to send me a message, and I'd be happy to help you out with terms if you get stuck on those along the way. But an example here, if it did have glands on the base of the leaf, it tells you that it would be genus Prunus. And here's a picture of what a plant from the genus Prunus looks like. And the glands on the base there, this one has 3 glands, and they are quite distinct, and our sagebrush does not have those glands on the petiole or the leaf base. So we're going to go on to question number 22. Question 22 asks if the leaves are wedge-shaped, and which would mean the apex or the tip is much wider than the base of the leaf, and it asks if the apex is 3-lobed. And our leaf is definitely very narrow at the base and wider at the tip and 3-lobed. So we are going to go on to question 23. Question 23 has the choices of leaves aromatic, sage-odored, gray-green in color, and several times longer than wide, which would be Artemisia tridentata, or big sagebrush, which is what we do have here. The other choice would be the leaves are not aromatic, they're green above and white below, which doesn't fit, so we'll go ahead and stick with the Artemisia tridentata or big sagebrush. So hopefully you can find either this or the rabbit brush around where you live and get that mounted get that pressed and mounted and go through that keying for the discussion this week. If you happen to have another plant that you have already done, then you feel free to use that on your discussion this week, but I'm hoping that the sage or rabbit brush will be an easy option and one more plant to get done for your plant collection. So next we'll move on to some different broadleaf plant families, and we're going to be covering this week the willow family, the birch family, and the beech family. A lot of the plants in the next few slides mention that the leaves are simple, alternate, and deciduous, and you'll see this pop up over and over again on each slide. So I just want to quickly review what that means. And simple means that there is one leaf on the leaf stalk or petiole coming off the stem. So there are not like a group of leaves coming off of that leaf stalk. Alternate means the leaves come off the stem at different points rather than 2 leaves coming off at the same point and being opposite each other. And the picture below is a white birch, and that shows an example of these simple alternate leaves. And deciduous means that the plant loses its leaves each year. Some of the plant families we'll cover this week are deciduous, and some of them are persistent or evergreen, which means they remain throughout the year. The first family that we'll cover this week is the willow family, or Salicaceae, and there are 2 different genera, which is just the plural of the word genus. So there's 2 different genera in the willow family and 350 different species. The willow family is the genus Salix, and cottonwoods and aspens are the genus Populus. Within the willow family, the first genus that we'll cover is genus Salix, or the willows, and there are 70 different species in North America. They can be trees or shrubs, but all of these different species a lot of them have the ability to hybridize, which means different species can reproduce together and make mixes between the species. So classifying the species can be very difficult. And for this reason, your plant key just classifies willows to the genus level, or Salix. So if you do find a willow for your plant collection, you'll just put Salix spa as the scientific name, or willow as the common name. You don't need to key it any further than the genus name of Salix to get full credit. So the willows generally occur along water. They are a very important habitat for wildlife, and they're great at preventing erosion along streams. So a lot of times they're used in stream restoration. They are dioecious, so if you do collect a plant and are looking for the flowers, they have female flowers on one plant and male flowers on a separate plant. And for the identification, the best way to identify is if you can find a fruit, and the fruits have capsules that break open into two parts and contain a number of cottony or silky haired seeds. So a lot of times along the water you'll see white kind of cottony fluff floating through the air, and if you're in an area near willows, that's probably what that's from. So the leaves can vary by species, but they are always simple, alternate, and deciduous, and typically they're very long and slender, like the leaves in the bottom right-hand picture there. The next genus in the willow family that we'll cover is the genus Populus, which includes cottonwoods, which may also be called poplar, and aspens. The best way to identify these plants from this genus, the cottonwoods and the aspens, is by their fruit. They have small round capsules, and when they break open, they're filled with tufted seeds that look like cotton floating through the air, look like cotton puffs. So that's where it got the name. That's where the cottonwoods got the name cottonwood. They have male and female flowers on separate plants. Their leaves are, again, simple, alternate, and deciduous. Leaf shapes can vary, but they're typically sort of triangular shaped, as you see in the pictures below. Here's a map just to show you where the different cottonwoods and aspens, where their range is. So you could have cottonwoods and aspens close by where you live. So both the cottonwood and the aspen could live in your area, assuming you're around Klamath Falls. So that's the end of the willow family. Next we'll be covering the birch family, or Betulaceae. There are 6 different genera and 100 species within this family. Examples are birches and alders, and their flowers are also in catkins like they were in the willows. First genus we'll cover in the birch family is the genus Betula, or the birches. There are 15 different birch species in North America. They are usually the first trees that come into an area after disturbance in areas where there are birches. And their bark is usually very thin and peels off in sheets. The mature catkins tend to fall apart when touched, unlike the alders, which stay together when they are mature. So the terminal twigs, or the end of the twigs, are very long, thin, and floppy, and it can give the trees sort of a weepy appearance. Their leaves are also alternate, simple, and deciduous. Their leaf shape can be ovate to sort of triangular with long tapering tips. The leaf margins are usually singly or doubly serrated. Alders are the second genus that we'll talk about in the birch family, and these are the genus Alnus. There are 40 species of Alnus or alder worldwide, and 15 of these species are native to North America. Most of the alders in North America are shrub-sized, and their most distinguishing characteristic is their fruit, which looks like a tiny pine cone. So if you see a tree that looks definitely like a broadleaf tree or shrub, but has little tiny pine cones on it, it is most likely an alder. The cones will stay on the tree for most of the year, so that's a great way to identify the plant. The twigs tend to be reddish in color, although not always. The picture in the bottom right there shows sort of the red color that can occur on the twigs. And the leaves are also simple, alternate, and deciduous. Leaf shape is usually oval to round, and the leaf margins are serrate or doubly serrate. So that's the end of the birch family. Now we'll move on to the beech family, which includes the oaks and the beeches. There are 8 different genera and over 900 species, so it's a pretty large group. The largest genus within this species, or within this family, is oak. So there are a lot of different oak species. That's genus Quercus. Other genera in this family that also reach tree sizes are, besides the oaks, are beeches, tan oaks, chinkapins, and chestnuts. So the oaks are genus Quercus, and there are 200 to 300 different oak species, making it the largest genus within the beech family. The leaves are, hopefully you know the first part by now, simple and alternate, but we're mixing it up a little bit here, and these leaves from the oak trees can be deciduous or persistent, which means they're evergreen, or the plant is evergreen and doesn't lose its leaves during the wintertime. So the fruits are acorns, which is one of the best ways to identify the oaks, and the leaves and acorns can vary greatly in shape, as you can see in the picture below, and they are often broken into two different categories, the red or the black oaks and the white oaks. So we'll go over those two different categories next. The red or black oaks usually have leaves that are lobed, and the lobes have a prickle on the tip, so they might poke you a little bit if you pick up those leaves. The acorns take 2 seasons to mature, and the acorn caps are usually fuzzy on the inside, and the acorns will have a bitter taste. So the picture below shows a California black oak, which you can kind of see there, the little prickles on the tip, and despite the name, the California black oak does occur in Oregon too. The other group are the white oaks. They don't have prickles on the leaves. The leaves can be lobed or unlobed. The acorns take 1 season to mature. The acorn caps are smooth on the inside, and the acorns taste sweet. And the picture below shows an Oregon white oak with no prickles on the leaves. As I mentioned, some of the species within the oaks do have persistent leaves that don't fall off during the wintertime, and one example of this is Quercus chrysolepis, or a type of live oak, and the live oaks are evergreen, and because of this, since they keep their leaves all year long, the leaves are a little bit thicker and tougher usually than the oaks that lose their leaves each fall and winter. So this allows them to survive through the colder winters due to these thicker leaves. So these show you some pictures of what the acorns and leaves in the tree looks like from a live oak. The next plants that we'll cover within the beech family all have leaves that are simple, alternate, and now we're moving to persistent. So the beeches, chestnuts, chinkapins, and tan oaks all have simple, alternate, and persistent leaves. Beeches and chestnuts are typically more of an East Coast type plant. So you may not see them around here, but just to briefly cover those, their fruits are have nuts within sort of spiny burrs, and both their nuts are good for eating. The leaves are simple, alternate, and persistent, and the pictures below show what a beech nut looks like. Next in the beech family we have the genus Chrysolepis, or chinkapin, and their fruits are probably their best identifying characteristic if you can find the fruit. They're also kind of covered in spiny burrs like the beeches and the chestnuts, but they do occur in this area, so you may see those here if you're out and about in the forest. The leaves are, as all of these that we're talking about in the next few slides, are simple, alternate, and persistent, so they're a little bit more thick and leathery than some of the other plants that we've covered earlier. Our last genus that we'll cover in the beech family is genus Lithocarpus, or the tan oaks, and despite their name, they are not actually an oak. The oaks are genus Quercus, and tan oaks are genus Lithocarpus. Their fruit is a good way to identify this genus. They look sort of like an acorn, except for that cap of what would be the acorn is kind of prickly all over it. So, and the cap can completely cover the fruit there, or just be on the tip of it in a more mature fruit, as shown on the left-hand picture there on the bottom. The leaves are simple, alternate, and persistent. They're a little bit more stiff and leathery. The young leaves are covered with woolly hairs, giving it sort of a fuzzy appearance, and are sort of a dark green. The older leaves lose their hairs and get lighter in color. So plant names, often if you look them up on the internet, you might see conflicting names. The names get changed a lot when people decide they think they're more like one plant or the other. They'll change their name and change either the genus or species name. So the genus name for this plant is currently Lithocarpus rather than Lithocarpus as in your text. So if you see that different name on the internet, if you look it up, that's why you'll see those two different names. So as I mentioned, despite the name, it's not actually an oak.
That's the end of week 4. If you have any questions while you're keying out your plants this week, please let me know. Otherwise, I will be in touch with you in week 5.